Hello and welcome to another session on appreciating poetry. We shall begin with Shakespeare's Sonnet 18, the very famous sonnet. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? A beautiful love poem. Now, I'm not going to speak on Shakespeare and sonnets because we have already done that in our first video on Shakespeare when we did Ways with Words Sonnet 29. But as a recap, a small quick recap. What is a sonnet? A sonnet is a lyric of 14 lines. It has a rhyme scheme. There are two types of sonnets, broadly classified into two: Petrarchan sonnet and Shakespearean sonnet. It's actually Italian sonnet and the English sonnet. Petrarch used it or popularized it. Of course, Dante also used it. Both of them beautified this sonnet form, and therefore it is known, the Italian sonnet is known under Petrarch. And the English sonnet, though it was there is a divergence from the Petrarchan sonnet, and it's mostly the contribution of it was the contribution of Daniel and Drayton. It was popularized by Shakespeare. Hence, the English sonnet came to be known as Shakespearean sonnet. Now, the Shakespearean sonnet can be classified as 3 quatrains. The stanzaic structure of a Shakespearean sonnet would be, it has 3 quatrains and a couplet. A quatrain is a set of 4 lines. So 3 quatrains and a couplet, totally 14 lines. Okay, it has a rhyme scheme: A B A B, C D C D, E F E F, G G. All right. Now, Shakespeare's sonnets are said to have, or is the sonnet sequence is divided into 3 parts. The first one is said to have been written for a fair youth, sonnet 1 to 126. In that also there is a small division. 1 to 17 are called the procreation sonnets, where the poet Shakespeare is urging this fair youth to get married and have children, so that his beauty will pass on to the next generation and it shall be preserved. So they are called procreation sonnets. Of course, so this 1 to 126 is written in or is said to have been written for the fair youth, and sonnet 127 to 152 has been written for a dark lady. Now, presumably it would be a woman named Mary Fitton. There are other assumptions also, but anyway, we do not know who the person is, but Shakespeare did have an intense relation with her as well. So the final sonnets, that is the 2 sonnets, the final 2 sonnets 153 and 154, are called Greek sonnets. They are not concerning, or it is like a summing up, and it is universal in tone. It is not about the fair youth nor about the dark lady. It has a universal tone. It's a general sonnet. They are both general sonnets, and they are called Greek sonnets. Okay. Sonnet 18, which is Shakespeare's most famous poem, which was written in admiration of the fair youth, is one of the most beautiful love poems. The poem is an attempt to immortalize the beauty of fair youth in human memory through his poetry. So let's begin the poem. I'll just read out the poem first, and then we'll do it, we'll take up each quatrain and critically analyze it. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometimes declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou oust, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So let's divide this into 3 quatrains. So you will find, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? The first 4 lines form the first quatrain of the poem. You will find the A, B, C, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F rhyme scheme. Day and May, temperate and date, shines and declines, dimmed and untrimmed, fade and shade, oust and growest, C and D, that is the final couplets. All this we had already discussed in when we did Sonnet 29, so I don't think there is any need to discuss this again, which would be monotonous, which would be boring. I don't want to do that. So let's just skip that, because we have already covered it in Sonnet 29, Ways with Words. So let's take up the first quatrain. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. So here you will find nature. He starts the poem in the usual style, as like personifying nature. So it is essentially, Sonnet 18 is essentially a love poem, but again its object of affection is not as straightforward as it first seems. We don't know, there is as we move on only we understand what it is and whom he is talking about. The speaker initially tries to find an appropriate metaphor to describe his beloved. Probably the young man that Shakespeare is speaking about in his sonnets. It could be Earl of Southampton, it could be Earl of Pembroke, it could be his co-actor. We do not know. But anyway, let's assume this man to be extremely handsome, and it is this person, young man, that Shakespeare is talking about. Now he is trying to immortalize the beauty of his friend, and he suggests that he might be compared to a summer's day, the sun, or even the darling buds of May. Again, the poet feels that his metaphors are, not apt, and he seems to be searching for metaphors, and he seems to be searching for a correct metaphor. And this reflects, or this speaks about how beautiful his friend is. And Shakespeare, or the poet, realizes that none of the metaphors that he has used in the first quatrain, the poem as such, will work, because none of the natural beauty is forever. It will decline. Nature has its decay. Nature has its decline. Nature has its death. So he feels that his beauty, which should be eternal, which should be permanent, which he wants to immortalize, cannot be compared to the objects in nature. So the first 8 lines of the poem, that is the first quatrain and the second quatrain, it documents the failure of the poet in using nature to compare the young man's beauty. Now that's the traditional style of writing poetry also. There is also another thing that you have to remember here when we do critical analysis. You should bear this in mind. This is also a kind of telling you about the power of poetry. Alright, when you do criticism, you will be touching upon all these things, because you will find the power of eternal, immortal power of poetry. You will also find that you will find how strong and powerful poetry is as compared to other things in nature. Okay. So coming back to the poem, the final 6 lines of the poem, that is the last 6 lines of the poem, argue that the young man's eternal beauty is best compared to the poem itself. In a very strikingly circular motion, it is this very sonnet that reflects and preserves the young man's beauty. Sonnet 18 can thus be read as honoring not only the poet's beloved and his beauty, but also bringing out the power of poetry itself. It is also honoring of poetry as well. Thus, nature is subject to decay, but art, poetry, it is eternal. And in the second half of the poem, you will find that the poet, after his failure to find the right metaphor from nature to exemplify his beloved's beauty, goes on to use poetry instead, which will eternalize and immortalize his beloved's beauty. As long as mankind survives, his beloved's beauty shall be preserved and read and reread by generation after generation. Let's begin. The poem, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" it begins with the speaker suggesting a series of similar questions to describe the young man's, that is his friend's, beauty. In each case, he quickly lists the reason why the simile is inappropriate. So he finds a simile, he finds a metaphor, not a simile, metaphor, and he compares it with nature, the beautiful things in nature. But later he changes it, he quickly changes it, because he understands that whatever objects in nature that he takes up, these objects are subject to decay, death and decay. Okay, and therefore he will not be able to immortalize the beauty of his friend by comparing his friend's beauty with nature, because nature itself has death. Nature itself will decay. Everything in nature will have its end. So he therefore goes on to find something else that will immortalize his friend's beauty. For instance, first in the first quatrain itself, what does he compare his beloved's beauty to? He compares a young man's beauty to a summer's day. Summer is bright and beautiful, right? Well, it is not for us. Sometimes it's sticky, but still it's normally bright and beautiful. Summer is associated with happiness, right? But then he has to admit that the metaphor fails to capture the young man's full beauty. He is more lovely and more temperate. As the poem proceeds, the poet finds that whatever he is compared to, there is a dark underside to his own similes or metaphors. They suggest impermanence and decay. To compare the young man to a summer implies that the fall is coming. And now what is fall? After summer you have autumn. We have studied autumn, the fall season, the autumn season, the fall. Fall, which is autumn, and soon we will have winter. So that is the death or the end of a cycle, the season, right? Winter is decay or death. To compare him to the sun implies that the night will come. So sun means daytime. So one thing is, when you compare the young man to the summer, the season summer, you will also have to think about the next season, which is autumn, and very soon winter, the early winter. And if you are to compare, if he is to compare his beloved with summer's day, so first one, we try to analyze it using summer as of summer season. Now let's compare it or critically analyze the word summer's day. So day, soon after day, what comes? Night. Again, night is dark, night is dreary, night is the end of a cycle again, right? A day ends with a night, right? So to compare him to the sun implies that the night will arrive, and so on. So as I told you earlier, the first quatrain introduces the concern of the poem or the problem. Now the stanzaic structure, I want you to recollect what we studied in Ways with Words, Sonnet 29. The first quatrain introduces what? Introduces the problem, right? So the first here the Shakespeare introduces the concern of the poet, or the problem is introduced. This is a stylistic feature of sonnet, okay, especially Shakespearean sonnet. The first quatrain introduces the problem. The first line of the poem poses a series of questions, a rhetorical question, to be frank. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? A rhetorical question is one where you don't require an answer, it's understood. Okay, this question requires no answer. The speaker asks whether he should compare his beloved to a summer's day. So based on the, again, contextual clues surrounding Shakespeare's sonnet, most scholars assume that the person addressed in this sonnet is a young man, possibly of higher social standing than the poet. So it could be some earl, or it could be his patron, his sponsor. And his patrons, one was Earl of Pembroke and the other was Earl of Southampton. So some critics are of the opinion that Earl of Southampton best suits the sonnets than Earl of Pembroke. But again, we do not know. There is no evidence to, or there is no possible evidence to who this young man was. Now this is also a reference to the Renaissance proverb, as good as one shall see in a summer's day. So this has, see again, that's why I gave you the instance of Renaissance poetry, the Renaissance or the Renaissance poetry. Now in those times, the Renaissance, there is a very famous proverb which goes, or which says, as good as one shall see in a summer's day, which means something like as good as the best there is. So he is comparing, or in other words, he's asking, he's comparing the young man to something widely regarded as the best. So as good as one shall see in a summer's day, which means the best that you could possibly get. So the young man is compared to the best thing that has ever happened to him, or the most beautiful thing, okay, ever possible. So again, so in the first two lines you find him comparing, taking up a metaphor from nature to compare the beauty of whom? To compare the beauty of his beloved. And then you will find that he is at a loss because everything in nature is subject to decay, and therefore he is trying to find an appropriate metaphor that will bring out the beauty of his beloved. Okay, hope it's clear to you. The next three lines. Now the Renaissance proverb is something that's a reference. Okay, the Renaissance proverb, shall I compare thee to a summer's day, has a reference, or has a small tinge of Renaissance proverb there. That's why I said, shall I compare thee to a summer's day means you are the best. Can I compare you to the best thing possible? So it has hints of that Renaissance proverb. Okay, that's my reference. All right. Now the next three lines, after those two lines, the next three lines, he quickly lists out why this simile or why this metaphor is not working, why this metaphor is inappropriate. His reasons are rather surprising. The young man is more beautiful. He, according to Shakespeare, the young man is more beautiful than the summer's day. His beauty exceeds a proverbial perfect thing. It's much more than a perfect thing. He's so super perfect that there is nothing that we can compare him to. And he lists out the reason. He says, you are more lovely than the summer, and you are less extreme than the summer. Now what does this line mean? You are more lovely and more temperate. The word temperate. Now when you study Shakespeare, you will have to do a lot of reference. Okay. Now thou art more lovely and more temperate, which means you are lovelier than the summer's day, and you are more temperate, you are more gentle than the summer itself. Summer season is considered bright and beautiful, but when the sun gets hotter, like what we are suffering right now, it kind of gets very sticky and very irksome, right? You find it when the sun is too hot, you feel tired. The scorching heat is too much for us to bear. So in contrast to the heat of the summer's day, which is harsh, which is strong, his beloved is temperate. His beloved is more lovely and temperate than the summer's day. That is temperate, gentle, lovely, mild. Okay, that's the meaning. Another thing that I want you to remember, or I want to point out to you, is the word temperate. Now, it is derived from the word tempus, which means a period of time, a small period of time. A period of time again echoes an emerging concern in the poem with time itself. So, if you look at that word, the temperate, that word has another meaning. That meaning, that is temperate, is not just gentle, not just mild alone, but also it is suggestive of another meaning, which is a period of time. So this time, the play on time, that is the main concern throughout the poem. Time plays a pivotal role here. And what are the effects of time? How does time affect us? Are we going to stay young and youthful like now always? No, we will grow old, right? We will age, we will decay, and we'll die, right? So there is an echo of death, of decay throughout the poem. The sun is harsh and lovely, but Shakespeare says that his beloved is more lovelier and less harsh than, or he's mild and gentle, unlike the sun, or than the sun. And that would be the base meaning. Okay, that is the base meaning. But as we go a little deeper, as we dig a little deeper into the poem, there is an echo of, a subtle echo of decay, of death mentioned. Temperate, as I told you, the Latin word temperate, or which is derived from the Latin word tempus, means a period of time. So time as a reaper comes out here. All natural things are subject to decay. Even the sun is subject to decay. Once the gases run out, the sun itself will cease to exist. What will happen when the sun runs out of gas? Have you ever wondered what would happen? We will not have the universe. The universe will cease to exist. Right? Moreover, time brings decay to all natural phenomena, be it today or tomorrow. Thus he feels that his comparison of his beloved to the summer's day is inappropriate. Okay? In the following two lines, Shakespeare notes that summer is itself temporarily limited. Now look at that line. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all short a date. Now what do you mean by lease? The word lease, it's just like, a lease on a car. So when you rent a car, it's for a limited period, right? So likewise, the summer too enters into an agreement with nature. Thus, and it will remain there only for a while, and it must fade. So there is a decay of summer also. The summer is fading and it is giving way to the next season. So it is a limited period there. Lease means a kind of limited period. When you rent a car, right? You take it only for some time, right? You take a car on lease, right? So it is there only for a temporary period. And So he realizes that nature is, or nature's impermanence, emergence from spring falls into winter. Thus the buds of the beautiful flowers are shaken by rough winds, right? The rough winds of the fall, the autumn season. Summer will soon give place to winter. Again, it is limited. Thus, Shakespeare feels that the praise of his beloved to darling buds of May that blooms in summer is inappropriate, because even that beautiful buds that bloom in May is short-lived. Very soon it will be shaken by the approaching autumn season, the approaching early winter, and it will also die. So the perfection has a short lease. You will find this concern over time or the transience of life occupying the poem throughout. It becomes a central challenge as the speaker searches for a metaphor or a simile that does not or will not portray that his beloved will decay or die. He is searching, but he fails to find a metaphor that will immortalize the beauty of his beloved, immortalize his beloved as such. He does not want anything, any metaphors or similes that portray his beloved that his beloved would die, okay, or that his beloved would decay. He wants to preserve the beauty of his beloved forever. That's why he says, no, I'm not going to compare you to the summer's day, because summer itself is on lease. The summer itself, the period allotted to summer itself is very limited. Summer season itself is short. So he is trying, in the next quatrain he tries to find another metaphor that would try to immortalize the beauty of his beloved. So the first quatrain ends here, and the first quatrain, let's sum up. The first quatrain introduces the major concern or conflict of the poem. The major concern of the poem, the problem is introduced. The poet painstakingly tries to compare his beloved's beauty to several natural phenomena, but he fails. He feels that all these metaphors that he has used are inappropriate, for all natural things are prone to destroy or due to destruction of time. There is also an echo of time as a reaper, as a monster, as a destroyer throughout the poem. Summer too has its brief period of stay, and soon the winter will, with its frigid temperature, frigid nature, will come and kill or decay, destroy all that is there. It is like death, similar to death. Thus the time of decay, or thus the theme of decay runs throughout the stanza. So let's stop here for now, and we'll take up the next quatrain in the next class. Thank you and keep safe.